Mr. President, up here! I voted for you! Wait a minute. That guy on the grassy knoll's got a gun. He's gonna shoot the president. Holy smokes, I've got to do something. All right, Lee. Time to become an American hero.
Darkmyths.org and Neopolis Media Group proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast, featuring your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Stay tuned. Be right there.
Well, for one thing, it has a lot to do with our role as citizens of in this kind of democracy, in this kind of society. And I think also it fosters much respect and gratitude for those who went before us, who provided so much that unfortunately, we take for granted. And it gives us a feeling that we ought to measure up too. And that we can learn a great deal from these people, not just about politics and the law and government, but about life, about being a good human being. History is about people. History is human. And it's a marvelous antidote to the hubris of the present. When you see what these people did against great odds or adversity.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is episode 128 of the Lone Gunman Podcast, and I'm your host, Rob Clark. Today on the show, I got a returning guest. That's right, folks. The author of the best-selling Before History Dies and the new book, The Riptide. Welcome back to the show, my friend Jacob Carter. How you doing, Jake?
I'm doing well, Rob, and I appreciate you having me on because I really like being a guest on your show, and I love what you do.
Yeah, well, the feeling is mutual. I got nothing but respect for everything that you do. I mean, you know, we talked before you were on the show, I think last December. You know, you're a guy who's turned his life around totally 180, and you're doing some great things. And you know, for a young guy. And, you know, you've already got 2 books under your belt, and I'm sure you already got a third one in mind, don't you?
Yeah, it's somewhere deep down in there. I think, you know how, just doing any project, I just have to have the courage to start it, and once I've started, I'm stuck in it. So I just finished my second one, so right now I'm just trying to sell that one before I can even wrap my head around a third one. But there's some ideas rolling around.
Oh, yeah. Well, real quick, just tell everybody a little bit about your second book, The Riptide, in case we got some Bama fans out there that want to check it out.
Yeah, well, The Riptide was definitely different from my first one, which was, you know, a history book about the Kennedy assassination. The Riptide is, I kind of used the same format of oral history interviews, and I went inside the Alabama football program because they've been the most successful program in the history of college football. And I went in and I talked to their players to kind of see how they've been so successful and what goes on behind the scenes, and how they were able to build a program to be the most dominant program in the world. And that's kind of the gist of it.
Cool. So, yeah, if college football fans, Alabama in particular, if you want to check out Jake's book, they can find it, on Amazon or I know
it's
some
on
Barnes
Amazon. Yeah, it's at the Barnes & Noble stores and on Amazon and Goodreads, things like that.
Okay, good. Sounds cool, man. So it's been a while since I've had you on. There's been a lot of stuff happening in the JFK community. You know, I know you probably took a little time off to, write this latest book. And, it's when you're talking about the JFK thing, you kind of got to step away every once in a while, and then you come back into it with a fresh mind and fresh ideas. So what's been on your mind lately, Jake?
Well, I did step away after it, and I definitely think that's good advice from you and from anybody. Tony Summers once, when I interviewed him for my book, that was one of the top pieces of advice he gave me was, anytime you get deep into it, always take time to step away so you can keep your perspective on life. And so I wanted to be a more diverse author. I really don't want to just be known as a JFK researcher. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want to be able to bounce to different topics. But I think, I always have my eye on it. And when you're in this case, it never leaves you. And so I'm always watching online what happens. We're coming around that time of year again of the anniversary and coming around to the conferences getting together. And so people are going to kind of ramp it up. And, I wrote that book before history dies, and I wrote it to get younger people involved and to get the research community to try to work together and to try to have a new goal to move towards. And I definitely wrote it with conviction, and I don't want that idea to die, and I don't plan on being quiet until we can make some sort of change to do it. So I haven't seen much change, but change is a slow progress. And so that's just kind of on my mind. And I think with the elections going on, we see the media and things like that, and we see the how biased people can be with their ideas and their worldviews, and how this bleeds over into the JFK community. So that's the kind of stuff I'd like to dig into.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right when we're talking about, bipartisan politics, and, people get very, very opinionated one way or the other. And it's exactly the same way when you start looking at some of this JFK stuff, when not even just lone nutters versus conspiracy theorists, but there's little factions inside of each camp that just can't seem to get along or agree on things either. I mean, just for example, if you take a look at, the conferences in Dallas, okay, you have a so-called respectable organization, Lancer. They have real researchers and try to give you the best of what's going on in new research. And, I give them props for bringing in some of the newer faces like you last year and Carmine this year. And then down the street, you got what I call the Cuckoo Conference, and it's Judy Baker, and it's Roger Stone and all these other people that are on the fringes. Well, what I like to think of as the fringes, but in reality, these people, they have a heck of a lot of followers and people that believe everything that you hear. And like I was talking to Carmine about, Fred. I was talking to Fred about this, and you look at the conference and almost all the speakers are contradicting each other in some way or another. You got LBJ did it, guys, over here. And then, you got CIA guys did it here, and they all know he was killed because of aliens, and, and on and on. And it's frustrating at the most because, people are not going to go to both conferences. They're going to pick one, and that's where they're going to be. They're not going to, most people don't slide back and forth, between conferences that are that close together. I mean, some do, don't get me wrong, but, if that's in your vein of research where you like to hear the more fantastical stories, but not a lot of evidence, I mean, you can sit there all day at Lancer and hear a lot about evidence and evidence and evidence and documents and be bored to tears, Sure, I'd rather hear somebody tell me some fantastical stories. But in the end, it's all about trying to get to the truth. And, when you're looking, at least from my opinion, when you're looking at this other conference, this Judy conference, I don't see much truth over on that side of things. But I do see a money-making machine, an opportunistic is what I like to call it, because when COPA went away, when John Judge passed away, it left an opening, and it didn't take long for her to slide right in and grab a foothold. And it's not just November in Dallas conference. She's putting on Oswald birthday party conferences, conferences in April over in England. It's almost like a year-long thing. Like this year, she's got 2 books coming out. Last year was a book. Just seems to keep going and going and attaching herself to this Rafael Cruz story, and it's always something. And I just, personally, I just can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, well, the old saying from the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun. And I don't think that could be more relevant to what you're saying because, my deal is with the conferences is like I have a lot of respect for Lancer. Like you said, they let me speak there. They let other people speak there. I think it's put together well. However, to be completely honest, I do think they're losing a little bit of a grip on what the goal is. And I mean, I love Deborah Conway and all this, so none of this is personal, but it's just the truth. And by mixing in with some of the more fringe conspiracy theorists and mixing that in and mixing those conferences in and allowing people in there who have these fantastical theories, eventually it'll get swallowed up by those people who sell those kind of stories. And so the problem I have with the conferences is, at what point is it unproductive to bring people in who are 60 years old and up, bring them in a conference, the same people that come every year, and have a lot of the same theories and topics gone over and over again, since there's not a lot new in this case coming out right now, and have everyone pat each other on the back. It becomes like a country club. No diverse topics, no diverse speakers who disagree with your point of view, no debates with a moderator. I really think they should go out to the colleges and work with the colleges and have these conferences sponsored as a credit to your college degree in history, and have kids come in and break the case down to them one by one and have speakers in for that, and let the younger kids mix in with the older researchers and vice versa. I think it would be healthy for the community. For the older researchers, I think it would hold people more accountable for what they say. I think it would discredit some of the fringe conferences who would refuse to do that. And I also think it would really help the case in mainstream media, because the media would love to cover things like that. So to me, the community has become very too introspective. They're so focused on what they do and what they're comfortable with. They don't see the bigger picture of this thing. And the title of my book was Before History Dies, and that's exactly what's going to happen if they don't get a hold of this, because it doesn't matter how much we research and stuff. If you don't have anybody to pass it on to, then it dies. And so that's it. And then on the other topic you said, which you made a really good point, my question is for some of these researchers, though they call themselves researchers, the fringe ones, is why is it that when someone disagrees with them or wants to correct them on some of their theories, that they accuse that group of being either working for the CIA or being arrogant or not knowing what they're talking about, yet they are never wrong. And that means they have every single detail about this case down to a perfection. And then the second thing I got to ask for this group is, why do they viciously attack people's character whenever someone speaks out against them? Why do they write a long blog and come after them and insult them personally, try to destroy their personal life? You have to question the motive of somebody like that when they respond that way. Because if they were really interested in the truth at these conferences, they were really interested in what's going on and not just lining their pockets, they wouldn't attack people like that. And I think that's a major problem in the research community. The personal insults and the attacks that I see online, with the challenge I would lay to any researcher in the world. And I'll tell you some insight real quick, Rob. I was in a group email with some of the top researchers in the world on this case not long ago. They were very bitterly fighting about things that were going on. The insults got incredibly personal. And I chimed in and told all of them, I said, how is this helping the case out? Y'all insulting one another. How is anyone learning from this? What example are you setting for me? And I never got an email back from it. And the whole thing stopped. And so my thing is, that's a major problem, and it won't get healed until we break up these fringe conferences and we stop having fact pat clubs and bringing the same people in and patting each other on the back and never being challenged. And when we are challenged, we just slander that person and demonize them. And it does no good. You just don't grow that way.
No, you're exactly right. And I know the people you're talking about, and you can. It's on both sides too. Don't get us wrong here. It's not just on the conspiracy side of things, referring to lone nutters. There's some.
Oh, no doubt, yeah.
There's some pretty
Both
vicious,
sides.
guys over there that don't have any better argument than to just attack your character or make fun of your your research ability or whatever they want to bring up, and their holier than thou attitudes, and like I said, it's on both sides. And I think when you start breaking it down and to kind of get us to that point, you brought up an interesting point earlier about the media. When it comes to wanting to cover things like these JFK conferences, that you don't see it, at least not now, or maybe on a major anniversary, or if Alex Jones decides to show up to one of these things, you might see something there. But, I really like your idea when it comes to getting the youth involved, because that is, at the conference I went to, I saw that as a major, major problem as well. I think I was the youngest person there, and I was 40, which is a huge, huge problem and a huge gap between a teenager and me, as far as people that could have something to contribute to this case. Because, granted, we're 53 years in. There's not a lot of new stuff coming out. And what new stuff we do have coming out is pretty much just on a debunking level. Like Joan Mellon's research into debunking the Mac Wallace fingerprint. While it's good to finally put that myth to rest, once and for all, so we can, get a little closer to the truth. It's not really new groundbreaking research. And at this point in the case, like you said, there's not going to be much new groundbreaking research coming out unless we have, something coming out in these document dumps we've been getting. And, next year when the files are released. So, we're kind of treading water here, Jake.
No, and I definitely agree with you. And the next argument would be, well, we do have new stuff coming out. We should be doing this and that. My thing is just could not stress it enough. If the JFK research community does not do something to stop being just stuck on their own ways, if they don't do something to swallow their pride and to bring other people in, if they don't get creative, this thing will die. And that works in any system. And I got to really question the motive of some people. This is not all the researchers at all, because I have a lot of respect for them. But I got to question the motive of some. Do they have too much pride to let their identity in this case go? Meaning, will they bring younger people on? Can they teach them? Can they be creative and bring them in? The whole deal is, the excuse is that younger people won't listen. That's just not true. What we don't want is to have things force-fed down our mouth, and when we disagree with somebody, to be cursed out, like what happens online. Lone nut and conspiracy aside. But you know what's sad, Rob, is this thing has turned into a lone nut and conspiracy, and like you said, the subgroups and the fringe and all this. And people really act like, it's very arrogant of people to act like they own history. They own JFK. They own this case. And they have a right to do whatever. And you really see the ugly side of human nature in this stuff, the character behind it. The pride, the entitlement, the control, these type of things that people struggle with, that we all struggle with. I just feel like it's time. It really is time, especially with these documents coming out, for people to really take a step back and go, hey man, we're doing all this research and work, but we have no plan B for later on. And how do these people how do we not know that the CIA is not aware of that? That government agencies aren't aware of that? Why wouldn't they hold the documents back another 20 years and just allow these people to pass on? And then there's not going to be anybody left really around that even cares. And they could even roll out 30, 40 years from now. Just imagine this, Rob, and say, yeah, you know what? That's dead history. And there was a conspiracy to murder the president, and Oswald was with the CIA and all this stuff. And let's say they said that. And guess what? They're going to get away with it because no one is going to be there to care.
And nobody's going to be around anymore that is even associated or affiliated with any of this stuff. You might have Oswald's great-great-great-great-grandchildren around by then, but by then it's going to be ancient history, at least, for them, because if you look at society from the early 60s to now, it's a stark difference, even on the technology side of things. And as far as the family dynamic, it's a lot different, even with people having just some spare time to just do a little research. I think that's 90% of the problem, Jake, is it's so much easier for people to get online and listen to people, that are on the fringes, that have the loudest mouths, to tell them a story. And they be, okay, well, I don't have to look into this anymore because now I know what happened. This person over here is telling me exactly what I need to know. It sounds good to me. Let's roll with it. But speaking of the fringes, I always thought that, in this little Facebook bubble, we kind of know who most of the people are and what side they fall on and this and that. If you go on the forums, like the Education Forum or Deep Politics or ROKC, where, you see the people that contribute the most. It's not, it's not a lot of people. It's a handful of people. It's the same people. And then you step out of that box and, I go over, because I think most people would agree that people like Jim Fetzer, Larry Rivera, Ralph St. Kay, that whole crew of their little Oswald Innocence campaign and their little self-proclaiming that they're the best JFK researchers in the world and this, that, and the other. I go on YouTube, man, and I see how many people listen to my show, and I only basically not advertise, but put it out there just on Facebook, through social media. My show's on YouTube, but it's not my main medium. Theirs is, and I go over there and see the number of views that their videos get of their radio show, and I'm like, how is this even possible? Because they don't pimp it on social media at all. Not really. And it blows me away, Jake. Their shows get more views than mine gets listens, which astounds me. Well,
yeah, and in a way, it's it shouldn't too much, because to encourage you, and something I stay encouraged by is, if you look throughout history, what the majority of people usually believe or follow is not right. Masses are usually wrong about 98% of the topics. So, we call them sheep or sheeple, people, like you said, who don't do research, who are not skeptical in areas they should be. The amazing contradiction here is that a lot of those guys who follow these sites and do these type things claim to be the most skeptical people of the government, and yet they buy hook, line, and sinker into this stuff, and I'm very thankful I got out of that fringe stuff early on, just using logic and following the contradictions. So I really believe that the people who do listen to your show, the people who listen to people like Carmine and, some of the more logical researchers on both sides, who are not disrespectful to other people and really care about history, are the people that matter. These guys will cry about how they don't get on major documentaries and things. Well, the reason why they don't is because they're so disrespectful, and that's not the way the world works. No one wants to pull somebody on who acts insane and who peddles insane theories on a major documentary and have them speak, because these companies have to make money and have a reputation to uphold. I know I don't want my name associated with certain people, which is why I lay low in the community. But to encourage you, I think the people that really want to know about the case will listen to your show. And the people that want to know and want to grow will follow it. At my job in drug counseling, we have a saying where it's worth it if it's just for one person. Meaning, if I counseled for 100 years and only one person got off drugs, it was worth it, even though the thousands of others never turned it around. And so I said in my speech at Lancer last year, you never know who you're going to impact. You never know. The next JFK could be somewhere listening, be a little boy, little girl somewhere in a classroom, who will once again, actually care about this country, care about history and things. I mean, look at where we're at now in politics. This is all, everyone's worried about the election, what's going to happen. People are not looking at the news. Our two candidates, the only two that will realistically have a shot, only got to this place because we went through a whole generation of raised on Facebook, and we've lost teaching history in the schools, and this is the result of it. People don't fact check, they follow their bias. And so I don't sit there and try to convert people over from people like Judith Baker or Ralph Cleek or these groups. I don't try to argue with those people or convert people over. If they want to follow them, they can, and that's fine. All I want to do is present the best evidence I can, be as fair as I can, and be fair to history. And then the ones that follow that, to me, are the ones worth following. The ones who don't, they're not worth. I'm a Christian. I tell people, Christ, 12 people followed him out of all of Israel. So no matter what anyone's belief is, the perspective there is just because very few people are following this way and there's a whole massive group following that way does not mean the mass is right. Usually they're wrong.
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
And just to illustrate a point, I decided to bring back a segment for this show, and it's called Ridiculousness of the Week. And I could not help it, because when I saw this online, Jake, I could not believe what I was seeing and hearing. And the ridiculousness of this week is that Ralph Cinque and the Oswald Innocence campaign have made a startling discovery. And that discovery is that it really was not Jack Ruby shooting Oswald in the basement of the DPD. No. They claim that it was actually FBI agent Bookout who was dressed up like Ruby and then was switched. And then somehow Jack Ruby just kind of went along with all this stuff. To me, even on the face of it, and their proof is a blurry picture where Jack Ruby, his face kind of looks like Bert, where he has like a unibrow. And it's just ridiculous. But people are buying this stuff up. He's getting published on various websites and blogs, and they've done 3 radio shows about it over there. He's going through his so-called evidence, and it's a candidate for sure for ridiculousness of the year. I mean, it's just, but people buy this stuff up, man, and you can't argue with them. You can't explain around it. Once they got their mind wrapped around it, that's it. Okay, well, if this guy says it, then it's true, and it's like, wow. Right,
and let's say for a minute, just let's go ahead and together we can break this down logically. And like I said, the media proves it, life proves it, this election has proved it. People are going to follow their bias, no matter what their candidate does, no matter what they've done or they say. They're still going to defend them and see them in the best light they can. So let's break this down. One of the things I'll say, one of the tools, because I really want to work at being someone in the research community that can provide solutions, because I hear a lot of talk, but sometimes I don't hear a lot of solutions from some of these people. And the thing is one of the solutions is, for my job, I had to learn character profiling. What a lot of people don't realize is a lot of these fringe conspiracy theorists, are sociopaths or narcissists. Some of them are even psychopaths. They don't have a conscience. It doesn't bother them to lie. They'll even live out their lie to keep it going.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't understand that messing with some very nasty people. And so you do not engage a sociopath. You don't engage a psychopath. That's not how you approach these people, these fringe people, because there's something very wrong with them and their character. And when you do that, it only hurts you in the end, because they're such great deceivers. They're very charismatic people and people love to follow them. until they're personally close with them and they get burned. So all of that to tell you this, I would recommend the research community not engage these people. And I'm going to use the example of Morgan Freeman when they asked him one time, I believe it was on 60 Minutes, what are they going to do about racism? What's he doing about racism? And Morgan Freeman said, stop talking about it. And, you know, I don't mean to be insensitive, but the Morgan Freeman's point there was stop stirring up the hornet's nest and keep talking about it. The more the media talks about it, the more it stirs everybody up. And I think the way to let this thing die is not to feed them and let their fringe people do their thing, and we'll do ours. And we'll see at the end of the day who's more credible. But, you know, they're going to keep coming out with these crazy theories, and the motive behind it. Why the Raphael Cruz story? Why Jack Ruby being switched out after 50 years now? All these theories are coming out. Why is that? Because these guys run out of things to say, and they run out of books to sell, and you got to come up with a new theory. And they really take advantage of people, and they twist history. And it's really sick. But I'll jump in with you. Let's just logically break that down. So at what point was Jack Ruby switched out? Because Jim Lavelle and everyone that was right there instantly knew who it was. Jim Lavelle and them saw Jack Ruby in the crowd before it ever happened. And then logically, why would the conspirators need a fake Jack Ruby to do the shooting when he was going to go along with it anyways and be arrested for it and die in jail? That makes absolutely no sense why they would need a fake Jack Ruby there. It's just a huge risk to the conspiracy that could blow the whole thing. And it makes no sense to swap him out when you're going to have the guy go down for it anyways. And then you let him live in jail another 3 years and he never says anything about it. And it's just, it really is not logical. And it is ridiculous, you know, and I just hope people can wake up and just on the most basic common sense say, man, that theory is ridiculous and it's debunked on its face. Because, I mean, there were how many people down there in that basement, and they took Jack Ruby in instantly, and they wrestled the pistol out of his hand, and you're telling me that Jim Fetzer and some of these guys know better than everyone in that room? And then here comes the other thing that everyone always says, oh, well, they were all in on it.
Yep.
Well, the conspiracy just grows and grows and grows. It's just ridiculous that you would get all of those people with different worldviews and different beliefs all to work together to switch out an FBI fake Jack Ruby for a real Jack Ruby when he goes down for the fall right there. It's just not realistic.
Oh, no, not at all. You know, I mean, what he's alleging, of course, is that, you know, we never see Jack Ruby's face until after it after everything happens. You know, he's captured from behind, and then the policemen kind of swarm over top of him and hustle him off down into the elevator. And then I guess that's when the real Jack Ruby comes out, and you know, and then
serves a 3-year sentence before he died in jail.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying here, Rob? That
I
why
do.
would you switch him out when you're going to have that guy go down anyways? It really makes no sense.
Why would he even agree to be the patsy for this? I mean, you know, he's supposedly he's doing okay, you know, with his clubs, and he's doing his thing. Why would he agree to take the fall for that? If he would have said, okay, look, you know, I'm not going to shoot the guy, but I'll take the punishment for it, and I'll go through the trials, and I'll sit in jail for it. That makes no sense whatsoever.
And not only that, the best thing is too, you can say Oswald denied his killing, which he did. He denied it over and over again. Even in his death, he wouldn't admit to it. But Jack Ruby admitted to killing Oswald. And that's another problem with this theory.
Yeah, that's true too.
And the pistol that was used, I know what they're going to say, that it was all set up and all that. But you know, Rob, at what point, man, is this going to stop? And you're right, it is the ridiculousness of the week, probably of the decade. Yeah. Because at what point is this going to stop? Like, it just keeps going and going and going. And to me, when you can do that, I can do that about anything in life. I can just keep arguing and keep saying everyone's in on everything and just be, a paranoid fanatic. But at some point, you got to have some logic come in and some evidence. And you know what? There's no evidence for that theory, and they can pump as many books out as they want. But there's no one, we don't really need to worry. We can calm down because there's no one, it's not like, some major historical documentary is going to give that any credence, or, you know what I mean? It's not like, the news media is going to be lined up at Fetcher's door to hear that. Everyone understands on its face that stuff's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, but look, as much as we can sit here and say that, you'd be surprised at how many people lap up every word and believe this. And I think a lot of researchers and people that follow their research need to have a higher threshold for so-called evidence. For me to manipulate a photograph or a still from a moving picture and blur it up and show it to you and say, this is evidence that this happened. It's not. It's really, really not. But, I think we need to have a higher standard of evidence, and like Carmine likes to say, stick to the documents, what can we prove? Some eyewitness testimony. And here's another thing, Jake. I was thinking about this the other day. Roy Lewis, okay, he was a Texas School Book Depository employee. He was an order filler like Oswald, okay? And for years, and look, the same guy that's bringing us Ruby Was Actually Book Out also brought us Oswald's in the Doorway, Love Lady's Really Oswald, okay? They're behind all this stuff. Well, what they're alleging is that Roy Lewis is captured in the Altgens photograph and that he was outside on the steps at the time of the assassination. Now, earlier this year, back in January, I think, Larry Rivera actually got to interview Roy Lewis, and he did say some interesting things. The problem here is it takes one, and credit goes to Robin Unger for pointing it out. There's a document in Mary Farrell that the Warren Commission did where they established where certain people were at the time of the assassination, employees. And that's not even Roy Lewis in the Altgens photo. It's another employee named Carl Banks. And Roy Lewis was actually inside the foyer of the front, the first floor. He wasn't even outside at the time of the shots. Unless he has changed his story and didn't tell the truth back then. But if you look at a picture of Roy Lewis and you look at a picture of the figure that, of the black guy right there under Billy Lovelady, it's clearly not the same person. To me, there's glaring physical attributes that are different. Roy Lewis back then was, I think, 16 years old. He lied on his application. He was 15 or 16. And he was a little dude. I mean, his nickname was Little Red. And the figure that we see in the Altgens was a big dude. Also another order filler. But I think part of the problem is now, these guys have been, and I think it's important for researchers to seek these people out and get them to talk and get them on record. Because now look what happens. They're being perverted by the fringe to support their own theories, because I'm sure they're going to twist this guy. And Roy Lewis is speaking at JudyCon this year. They're going to twist it, what he's trying to say, well, yeah, Oswald was standing right there behind me on the steps. I can see it coming a mile away, and through no fault of Roy Lewis's, they'll just confuse him and show him picture after picture and overlay over overlay and, say, well, this could have been this. Maybe you didn't notice. Maybe, somehow convince him that, this is what actually happened. And I can see it coming a mile away, Jake. And I wish, because there's a lot of researchers in Dallas. I think Roy Lewis has been local there for a long, long time. And for nobody to talk to this guy and get him on tape before now, is a shame.
Yeah, it's really sad, and it's especially when you have opportunistic people who are going to, like you said, they're going to seek him out, manipulate him, getting to see it their way, and which is very sad because we're talking about the elderly at this point. And Rob, it's like at the end of the day, it's like you said, they're going to have their following and they're going to pull this stuff off. And I do agree with you. I definitely agree with you. The research community should have an evidence threshold. There should be some sort of vetting system where people are discredited or credited. We all do that in our own mind. But the problem is you can't get people to stop insulting each other long enough to where resentment doesn't build up. And there's all these bickering and gossip and personal issues in the community. You can't have people to actually have character when they're doing it. And because of that, it's almost like, in a sad way, and I really don't mean to insult anybody, but it's like children. You can't get them focused enough to do anything. And, it does leave the door wide open for opportunistic people to come in and take advantage. So if you don't have any evidence, then people can say whatever they want in life. Unfortunately, this stuff right now, as far as right now, it doesn't work in the court of law. Now, I will say this. Our culture's headed to a scary place of where emotion trumps the law. And it means if an event happens and enough people get emotional about it, then that pressures the court system to make a decision based on emotion, no matter what the evidence says, because there'll be an angry public mob to come for the judge, to come for the DA, to come for the police's job, or whatever. It's a very scary time we're living in, we're headed to. JFK community is really no different. They follow the culture they live in. And their emotional stories, their emotional books and emotions, and they get people to cry and do these things, and the masses stir up and believe them without evidence. But I think something you pointed out too is interesting is you got to have evidence, right? And you have to confront these people, and we do have to correct what's wrong. And I really think it's important to start to keep younger people away from these people. And that's one of the efforts I'm trying to do on my home front. And I have been able to do it with a lot of younger people. And what I'm saying is we do have to confront them, but where people get sucked into that black hole is they confront them, whether they're lone nut or conspiracy, and they get stuck there with them, and they go down on their level, and they start cursing each other out, and it gets personal, and they sit on Facebook all day long and debate, sit in these groups and forums, and pretty soon, man, they leave themselves wide open like a boxer who forgot to put his hands up, and their character's assassinated, and that is the end of that researcher. And so I really like what you're saying. I think that it's smart to engage and debunk and have and reach out to these witnesses before these opportunists get to them, and have some sort of character threshold, have some sort of evidence threshold. And I think it's equally important, though, once you do it, to get out of the way, like a boxer, to bob and weave and get out of plain sight before you get assassinated in your character.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think some of these folks, it's really hard for, and there's not really that many real, serious, sitting in the archives type researchers anymore. They're just not. People don't have time to do this anymore. Back in the 60s, sure, people had free time, or, if people lived close, like Weisberg, he was retired, he had free time, he lived close to the archives, he could do a lot of this stuff. People like John Newman, they're retired, they got time to go sit in the archives and really dig through documents and find things and write books, intelligent books, thick books, that are very thorough about what they're finding. It's just, it's crazy to me. Some people have turned this into such a cottage industry, that, like you said, the same people show up year after year, and they got their books and they're married to their theories. And I think you were smart when you wrote your book, Jake, because you kind of took, like a bird's eye view of both sides of everything, and didn't really jump in the middle and start spouting what you believe and how you think this person's wrong or this person got that wrong. Because I think once you write a book, basically a research-based book, what you've written is pretty much in stone, and if you go back and change it, then what you're saying essentially is, hey, I kind of got it wrong the first time because I didn't really do a thorough enough job of researching. But I've changed my theory, and I've got a new book, and listen to me now. That kind of thing just doesn't fly. Once you, I think for example, all these LBJ books that finger Mac Wallace as a sixth floor assassin. Okay. That's their theory. LBJ was behind everything because, well, he had Mac Wallace in his back pocket. He was his personal assassin, and this, that, and the other. Well, once you take that away, okay, the veil starts getting a little thinner for your little theory, because what all these people that should have done, that put Mac Wallace in the sixth floor, is done independent, just like Joan Millen did. Go over, hire your own expert, and have it redone, because when you're talking about fingerprint evidence, it's a very subjective thing. At least it used to be. I mean, now it's pretty easy to put two fingerprints in a computer and say, okay, do they match or not? There's programs that actually run this stuff for you. You don't have to sit there with a magnifying glass going from page to page anymore. And not one of these people that write these LBJ Did It books did that. They took the first research that was done on the stuff 20 years ago by an 80-year-old guy using a magnifying glass on photocopies as gospel. And now they're going to pay the price for it because it's been debunked. But their books have been written, that's their cottage industry, and they're not going to come off of it easy.
Yeah, and let me ask you this question, Robin. Do we honestly believe, do people really honestly believe that even had they known that fingerprint wasn't his fingerprint, they wouldn't have gone ahead and ignored that and wrote the book anyways, and stuck their claim on that? And do we honestly believe that? I mean, I think they still stick by it. Even if she debunked it, they'll still stick by it. And that's the bias we went back when we were talking about early on, the bias we see in human nature. I was mentored underneath a guy for years, and very high level guy. He's a very smart person, high character. And I mentored underneath him for 3 years for my job. And one of the things he would ask me to challenge my pride as a person, he'd say, when you go up to people, ask yourself, what do they know that I don't know? And he said, and then you learn from them. You don't assume you have all the answers and that because it makes you a biased person. And so, do you ever see that? I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Do you see that going on in the research community outside of a few people? Do you see people go, hey, you know what, I was wrong about this, and I'll take it back, and I'm sorry I ever wrote it, and I'm wrong, and I'm really here for the truth, so I'm admitting I'm wrong, and let's move on, and I'll help y'all go. Do you ever see that happen?
It's very, very rare, because I mean, like, you look at somebody like Jim Mars or Anthony Summers. They've written their Kennedy books, and they wrote them back in the 80s. Sure, they've been getting little updates here and there, but for the most part, there's a lot of facts in both those books that don't hold water now 30 years later. But you don't see them going back, and they're kind of out of the game. They're kind of removed themselves from the the whole JFK element. They wrote their book, they've made their money, they moved on to bigger and better things. Okay, that's fine. But as it is with a whole, I think it comes down to people they just don't want to have their beliefs, shattered. And it's understandable. Look, I believed a lot of things when I first started looking into this case, and I had many of them shattered relatively quickly. I used to believe, my belief is Oswald was not even on the 6th floor. He didn't fire a shot. He didn't own the gun, and on and on. Like all conspiracy theorists believe it was, a gigantic conspiracy, and he was set up from the beginning. He's not guilty of anything, But then, as you go along and you talk to different people, and you find out different things, and you have to you have to adjust your way of thinking, or you're just not being honest with yourself. And I think that's the big problem, is people don't like to do that. They once they've got their deal and they think they figured the case out, it's personally insulting to them to have somebody come along and just shatter everything with some evidence that contradicts what they're saying,
It is, no, and you're exactly right. You hit it on the head, and that's something that doesn't come up a lot in this case, is the character profiling of each researcher. And, it's very important to know who we're learning from and how they're wired and what their motive is. All those things are important, instead of, like you said earlier, just being impulsive and jumping right in because we want to believe something. I want to believe the best things about myself are true in my personal life. I want to. My past history with drug abuse and things like that. I didn't want to believe I was dishonest. I didn't want to believe I had bad character. But, eventually you got to accept that if you want to get better. And all of us have a personal responsibility to make sure we are honest in this case. And that we aren't tying our ego and our personal beliefs into, like you said, trumping the evidence over what we want. And the only way this is going to change is if people actually take that on themselves and they don't want to be crooked and they don't want to be dishonest. Unfortunately, as we know, there are a lot of dishonest people that tie themselves in this case. And that's not because it's just the JFK case. There's a bunch of conspiracy freaks and all this stuff that people say. It's not that, because conspiracies happen in life. It is that there are just dishonest people in general in society. And to have high character and to look at evidence and to be honest and to put your personal beliefs aside for the sake of history, there are very few people out there that'll do that. It's rare, and the reason why it's rare is because it's difficult to be that type of person. It's difficult to deny what you want, what I want, and it's difficult to own up to it. Very difficult to do, but if the community ever wants to become relevant again, they're going to have to do it at some point.
Yeah, and if people actually want to know and get to the truth, you got to be able to roll with the punches and be willing to accept things that don't jive with your theories. At least when presented with actual evidence. And the dichotomy of this case, Jake, has always amazed me. Like if you were to compare the JFK assassination with the RFK assassination, okay, you have a Kennedy being killed by a lone assassin, in front of a lot of people, okay, on the face of it. You don't see what goes on in the JFK community go on in the RFK community. I mean, it's almost like, it's almost accepted that, okay, it's pretty clear, we got Noguchi's autopsy report, that there was powder burns, on the back of Kennedy's head, so how can Sirhan fire a gun from in front of him and get powder burns on the back of his head? You can argue, and if Humes' autopsies, what said something about the neck wound being an entrance wound. Well, there you go. I mean, it takes one small little thing that can change everything. And we wouldn't have been arguing about this for the past 50 years. I'm sure there's people interested in RFK case. There's people who've written books about it, but you don't see the kind of arguing. You don't see the kind of lone nut conspiracy crowds with the RFK assassination that you do with the JFK. And I think, just like one little small, little simple thing like that, if humans would have determined, and those guys at Bethesda, if they would have determined that throat wound was an entrance wound, then that changes everything. There would have been no, then it would have been a conspiracy. Oswald would not have been the patsy. He wouldn't have been the lone assassin. I mean, it changes the face of everything that has to do with the case, but we don't have that. It's not cut and dry. Like if you look at RFK and you think, okay, well, there's 14 shots fired in this small little pantry, but his gun held 8 bullets. Okay, there's a problem. Okay, there's obviously another gun in here. People's getting their cameras taken. They're taking, window frames and door frames off the walls, and they're losing evidence and this, that, and the other. And people accept all that. But with JFK, it's totally different, man.
It is, and the ultimate irony is in a way, I've sat back and wondered before, if JFK was killed by a conspiracy of high government officials, even if it's a group of them, or let's say that Oswald was tied in with the CIA in some way, which is what it's looking more and more like, based on like Carmine's work, people like Jefferson Morley, what went on down there in New Orleans and things like that. And let's say Oswald killed the president, and let's say that there was this massive cover-up, of people who were tied to Oswald. The funny thing is as much as the JFK community prides themselves on not being easily fooled, to me, if we're all sitting there, like you're saying, we're all fighting over all this stuff, I would think that would be their plan. The disinformation propaganda machine, the same thing they do with race baiting and other things. Just stir the media up and stir the people up and have them all fight each other. And then nothing ever gets accomplished, and the guilty party gets to sit back and watch the whole thing happen. And so to me, by everyone fighting and going on, this is something I said at the Lancer conference last year, by everyone doing this, they're actually playing right into the hand of the people that want to cover it up. That's what I would do, because you don't have to do a lot of cover-up work when everyone's too busy insulting each other, and the bigger picture is lost. And, I'll say this, Rob, I'm not a negative person, man. I give my life to help guys have a better life. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I don't want to come across as cynical and negative. I'm a very optimistic person, but I'm also very honest, or I try to be. And so when there is huge problems and there are cancer cells growing in the community, man, somebody's got to say it. You know what I mean? And somebody's got to pull it out. In order to be optimistic and in order to achieve better things, we've got to rebuke these things. And my question to every researcher, the challenge I want to lay out to anyone who hears your show is, would you talk to your daughter or your mother or a stranger you met out on the street, not you, Rob, but people, would the people who do this insult, would they treat and talk to their family members and other people like they talk to each other online? And if they wouldn't, then why do they do it online? Because it shows that it's shameful. And then the second thing is, we all want to solve what happened to JFK. Why do we love JFK? Because he was a great president, and he, even outside of his flaws and all of that stuff, the guy had a conviction for America that we really miss now, looking back 50-something years. Boy, how would we like to have that now? The conviction of a Robert Kennedy or John F. Kennedy that was robbed from us. That's one of the reasons why we care so much, and we should. But why is it that the JFK community puts quotes up of JFK, their profile pictures JFK, their cover photos, they do conferences, but then when it comes down to it, we don't act like JFK would. We don't act civil. We don't follow those quotes and apply them. We'll put a quote up of how JFK called for peace and tranquility and listening to each other and being teachable and trying to work together like he tried to work with the Russians and didn't go to nuclear war, and we admire all that, and then we'll get on the internet and cuss somebody out because they don't believe what we believe. And it's a huge contradiction, and it shows you how far people are off. And I've asked people that. You care so much about who killed him, and you care so much about this time of history and what happened to him, yet you don't act like anything he taught. You don't apply anything he taught. So what good is that? Because you know what? If somebody cusses me out, I really don't care who killed him. As far as their perspective goes, they've already lost me.
Yeah, I mean, it instantly falls to the wayside. When you start attacking people on a personal level, it just tells me that they have nothing else. They have no evidence. They have no proof to throw on the table and say, look, this is why I don't agree with you. ... Instead, well, you need to go read this book, and you need to do this, and blah blah blah, and it's quite obvious you haven't read this or that, and and yeah, it's a problem, and it's a curse of the age we're living in. Just think for a minute, if the first generation researchers had the internet, either
it would have been a mess.
yeah, either A, how much more they could have gotten done, or B, because everybody likes to think that all these people liked each other and got along, and that is absolutely not the case whatsoever. But back then you had to, researchers relied on collaborating by writing letters and sharing documents, and it was a very slow, methodical process of going through things. Now you can hop online and you can post a document and you instantly have it, and it's just way, way different than what it used to be. And you make a great point. Why can't we all just get along? You know what I mean? But it's also these people, they're products of the computer generation, the keyboard courage, the bullying that goes on, these holier than thou attitudes about their so-called research because they can manipulate a photo, and it gets to a point where you just have to walk tall, through this forest of mess, and just kind of not let it bother you, and keep doing what you're doing. And look, I'm guilty of it too. When I first started, well, a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was guilty of the same thing. I was trying to right a wrong with this Oswald in the doorway stuff, and trying to talk to Fetzer and politely and respectfully and tell him how he got it wrong and this and that. And, the response I got back was nasty, demeaning, every other word you could throw in there. And it eventually led to me doing this show. I started doing a blog, refuting everything they say by posting actual evidence and this, that, and the other. And, making fun of them as well. But it gets to a point where, I realized that, okay, 2 years later, nothing's changed. They're still doing this crap. They're still putting this stuff out there. Meanwhile, I've been distracted for 2 years, not doing any real research or not doing anything productive except for trying to refute what they say. Nobody's listening except them. And it's kind of a futile thing, which led me into, okay, I need to do something different. I need to change it up. I need to get back to my focus and get back to talking about the case and this thing, because it interests me, not just to fight with these other people, but on a whole nother level, which kind of led me into doing this show. So, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't probably be doing what I'm doing right now. I'd just be Rob Clark on Facebook, speaking in a couple groups here and there and doing my own thing and not really being too bothered about it. But, I guess on a personal level, this case has had a big impact, and it's because of what you were saying. JFK was this great president. He had great ideas for America. Was he perfect? No, nobody's perfect. We all have our flaws, but I think if he would have been given a chance to implement a lot of his ideas and a lot of his beliefs, that the world would be a totally different place right now. And the bad guys did win. They did win, Jake, and they're still in charge today. I was reading, if Hillary Clinton wins this election, okay, then the Bushes, the Clintons, and the Obamas will have been in control of America for the next 44, or for the past 40 years and the next 48. That's almost half a decade of 3 political families that have been in office, and that is just insane to me.
Yeah, it is, and it is interesting to live now and see all of this play out, going all the way back to that time. And it does affect, I think, what guys don't understand. I did tell the Lancer conference because, me personally, I do lean more towards conspiracy beliefs. I told the people at Lancer conference, don't ever let anybody shame you for believing in a conspiracy. Don't ever let anybody shame you out of it, because that's what a democracy is made of. We question our government. We hold them accountable. If we feel like something's fishy and they've lied to us, which they have lied to us about this case repeatedly, then we have every right in a democracy to question them and hold them accountable. There's almost this socialism type view that you don't question daddy government on anything because they'll tell us the truth. And if you do, you're not patriotic. I don't think that's the way JFK was. I do think questioning can get out of hand. Once you've arrived at a certain answer, it should be enough. But and along the lines of what you're saying about the different types of ways that it affects your life, and it affects my life too. But it's bigger than us. And I'm not a kumbaya, unrealistic type idealist. I understand not everybody's going to get along. You're not going to like everybody. But when there's something bigger than somebody, they sacrifice those things. Like, I'm sure me and you don't see eye to eye on every single thing. And I'm sure, and I've met a lot of people that in these Facebook groups and things, that people, when I did my book, who were very nasty to me, but I turned around and was respectful to them. And I said, I understand you're upset because I did it this way or that way, but we can talk about it. And then I was able to make friends with some of these people by not responding so vicious to their attacks. And it proves, even in mine and your friendship or other people's friendships, because we become friends through this case. You become a part of my life and I become a part of yours. And it proves that no matter, so let's say we disagree on a certain fact. What does that mean? Does that mean I have to insult you and you're an awful person and we should all just hate each other? And what is that going to accomplish? So it really is something you said earlier. It really is childish and immature, because when a child is out of communication tools, what does he do? He pitches a fit. And I'm telling you, some of the guys you see on the documentaries on CNN, on the History Channel representing both sides, I have seen them get incredibly nasty. And if those emails were ever released, people will be shocked at how vicious it is behind the scenes. And I've called them out for it because it's wrong. And we need to call people out for it. And we need to respond to them with kindness when they're vicious with us, and just stick to the facts. Because you know what? Sociopaths and people like that, they cannot stand when you don't get wrapped up emotionally and stand with the facts. And I believe that we will win out. I believe that we have to keep fighting for the truth, because, man, if we lose that and we allow these people to rewrite history, that's on our heads.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, well said. I think that's the impact, or that could come from all this stuff. I mean, they could, if once this older generation dies off and another one moves up to take its place, the history that we know could potentially be rewritten by the next generation of researchers. It's not out of the realm of possibility, because a lot of this older stuff is not online anymore. Books are books. People, they're going to disappear eventually. Everything's going to be electronic. A lot of these books are out of print. A lot of these people that wrote them aren't around anymore. So you're going to have, and of course, none of this stuff is in the history books as far as textbooks. We have the official version that they teach us a little bit of in high school, for the most part, with the exception of some good teachers out there, like Garland Brown, who makes his class do an actual, multi-week study of the case and kind of try it in a court-like setting, from both sides, which I think is great, that he implements that into his classroom. But he's in the very small minority of folks and teachers that are actually interested in this and get their students really, really involved, to get an interest in the case. And I think more of that is sorely needed. And I think your idea Now granted, some of these conferences, they'll offer a discount if you have a college ID. I know it's expensive to go to these conferences, but that doesn't solve the problem. I mean, the conference I went to did the same thing, and there wasn't one college age person in the joint for 3 days. So that's not good, and preaching to the choir gets us nowhere. I thought, at least back in the 90s, pre-internet, I guess, the conferences served a purpose. It was a place that you could get together with like-minded people and share research, share new research, new insights. But in the age of the internet, you don't need that anymore. I can get online, Jake, and I can share with you instantly a document that I find, and I can say, "Hey, man, check this out. This is crazy." But back in the 90s, I could have done an hour-long presentation on it that nobody else would have known about unless they came to Dallas to see me, or I decided to write a book about it. And I think once the whole conference process catches up to the younger generation and embraces the technology that we have to be able to share this with the world, not just whoever's lucky enough who can afford to go to Dallas to experience this in person, but like you said, getting younger people involved, getting on the technology side of things, start live streaming these things, really streamline the process instead of dragging it out over 3 days. And I think that's the future of it, and it should be reserved for people that have something to say, something to share, something, not just rehashing the same old thing that we've heard year after year, but only in a different way. You know what I mean?
Right, and we got to have leadership. I mean, we don't have leadership. We have people who have a lot of head knowledge. We have to have a leader. We are leaders, and leaders don't insult other people, and they don't get caught up in the fray. They have a vision. And I feel like these conferences were great in their time, and I don't want to say they haven't accomplished anything because that would be arrogant of me. Like you said, they have. There was a time period where it was great, but now it's turned into a country club, and that's just the facts, and nothing is being accomplished. Sure, you go home from the conference and you learn one new fact from last year, and like Wesley Brule Frazier got up to speak at the last conference at Lancer, and then guess what? Richard Hook gets up and is so disrespectful to him and challenges him so aggressively that it almost gets borderline physical in there. And I am just like, man, these conferences don't need to be happening like this anymore. We need to get Wesley Bill Frazier in front of high school students, in front of college students, while he's still around, and not in front of a bunch of researchers who have been to these conferences the last 20 years in a row. And I'm just saying that it's time for change. The JFK community cannot ignore this very much longer. We've got to reform things, and I guess it starts with people like me and you and Carmine and some of these other people out there. I'm busy at work throughout the year trying to get younger people involved, and I do it in a way where I let them choose. I don't try to fit my theory down their throat like I did in my book. Try to let them choose what they want to believe, because I know what they're going to choose if I do that. So you're right, and this is where we're at, and we are technologically behind, and we're behind in the media, and we're behind in getting people involved, and everyone's worried about these documents, and they are important, and they should be, but people are not worried about who we're going to pass these documents on to. We find them, and then what? So it's very important to understand where we're at, and this is where we're at. And so that's why I'm calling on the JFK community, man, to please reach out to one younger person and take them with you to these conferences, and, let them have their own critical thinking and get them involved. And I'm calling the people who run these conferences to get them involved. If I knew how to do it, I'd do it myself. I just don't have the time or the money to do it. But we've got to eventually turn it around.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Get them a book. Just say, here, read this book, just to get them interested. Here, watch JFK, watch this movie. get them engaged, get them involved, grab a hold of their mind and explain to them, the different theories of what could have possibly happened, and get them interested in the case. That's the main problem. When you go from being interested in the case, and you go from being interested in the case to actually researching the case, and then you go from researching the case to actually sharing what you've learned with other people, it's a very gradual process. And I see people jumping from point A to point D very, very quickly these days without a lot of the stuff in between. It's like, oh, well, Jim Marrs said this in his book, so I'm going to run with that. And I'll look for anything out there that supports my theory and ignore everything else that doesn't support my theory. And I'm going to shout it from the rooftops and, damn everybody who doesn't agree with me. That's what we're seeing a lot of now. And, on another level, it'd be great to, for these younger kids to engage folks like Wesley Frazier, but just for an example, I just did a show with Chuck, all about Wesley Frazier. As a matter of fact, he does have some questions. He does have some questions to answer, and he hasn't been really that forthcoming to researchers over the years. And of course, that needs to happen before we throw him in front of a bunch of high school kids and get another false history presented to them. When possibly things aren't quite right there. That's the problem with things. I mean, we're so far out now, Jake, man. It's really hard to figure this thing out. I mean, people have been trying to do this for 53 years, and here we are 53 years later, and still with no definitive answers. Sure, we've got great speculative theories on things that are supported by evidence, but as far as somebody that can say, hey, I've finally done it, I've solved the case, listen to me, I've got it right here, the smoking gun, you can't refute it, everybody can go home, that's not happened yet.
No, and even if we did know the truth, sadly, I don't think we'd follow it, because so many people claim to be the ultimate authority and know the truth. But, at the same time, if some smoking gun really did come out in these documents or something like that, I really believe it would be logical, believe that it would be something that couldn't be denied, and I'm hoping for it. But let's say it never happens. What are we going to do? We're going to devour each other until all of us are just so tired of it we don't want to do it anymore, I just refuse to act like the mass of people, and I refuse to get in these vindictive battles and all these things like this. I know everyone's got their expertise, and everyone's got their place they fit in this case, and no one is an island of itself. And I feel like my stick in this case is just kind of calling the JFK community to just start over, And it does not bother me if people are offended by that, because, like we talked about earlier, the truth is going to hurt, But like I said, we claim to love JFK, yet are we sitting here and claiming that there's not another way, that we shouldn't revisit things? I mean, isn't that what he did during the Cuban Missile Crisis? He did a different avenue. He had a different perspective, and he had a different plan and a vision that saved us from nuclear war. And I just, why is this case important? It's not just important to find out who murdered him anymore. It's important because history really matters, and we're living in a society now that does not care about history, and the JFK community has no right to hijack history and not share it with people. In the older days, grandparents and things like that would teach their kids to respect history, and now we're at a point to where I feel like the elderly community wants to hold on to history for themselves, and they really blame the younger people for not wanting to learn. But at the same time, that's easy to do when you're not trying to teach it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Jake. I mean, I see exactly what you're talking about. Many examples of it, on a daily basis. When with these young kids these days, even, high school age kids, if I'm trying to tell them, about JFK, it's like it's not even on their radar, man. Like if it doesn't have to do with whatever new Uggs is out, or the Starbucks, or the Kardashians, or something that is meaningless. I mean, just whatever new dance that dabbing. I don't even know what these kids are doing these days, but whatever their deal is, a lot of them just don't care. It's just not on their radar. It impacts their life zero to even understand what their history is, and could care less what their history is. And this is a huge, huge problem. And once they've reached that point in their life, it's too late for the most part. I'm not saying it's a hopeless venture, and I'm not saying it's a blanket statement for all teenagers, but it's important for role models and parents to instill in their kids that history is important, and to not let it die. Like it's important, because if we don't realize what our history is, we're doomed to repeat it. I don't know who said that, but it's a famous quote, and it's exactly true. I see it every day, man. I see it every day. And it's crazy. But for us, I can sit here all day and complain about it. But am I guilty for not doing anything about it? Well, I'm trying to do something about it. I'm putting a show out there. I'm saying, hey, kids, hey, it's a podcast. Kids, you can stream it live on your iPad, your whatever, while you're doing something else, and you can listen to this. And I try to be entertaining and not some monotone, boring guy talking about minute details about, whatever. I try to keep it upbeat, kind of entertaining and interesting. I'm doing my part so I can say what the problem is, and you're doing your part so you can say what the problem is. And for people out there that are doing nothing about it, really don't have a right to complain. So what I'm saying is, do something about it, people. Everybody out here listening, you got kids, teach them. History is important. What happened with JFK is important when it comes to historical perspective, because it affects where we're at today. And I see these kids, Trump or Hillary, huh? Who knows? We're here at this point because of what has happened in the past. And if people don't realize that, then we got a big, big problem, Jake.
Yeah, and I mean, can we, and it's just, you can Trump Hillary all day long, but here's what's sick about it is, and JFK wasn't, obviously, about some of his problems behind the scenes, and it would have been exposed had they lived in this time, and Nixon's and things like that. But can we please have somebody again who actually cares about the country and cares about history? And that's what we're missing. That's why the case matters. That's why people should be reaching out to younger people. Like you said, teaching their kids, start young. I know when I have a child, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to teach them to respect history. My dad was a history professor, so I was really blessed. So I grew up with a respect for it. And, the school system's going away from it. They're going to this Common Core stuff of math and science and all this, the most important. But history is being left, and history is the most important topic you can learn in school. And, the thing is man, what's scary is we're going to need a JFK soon. And there's going to come another time of testing like the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I just hope that there's some younger person out there that's not on the internet, not bickering and slandering, not getting caught up in that culture like these two candidates have done. I hope that there's someone out there that's like, you know what? I really love America, and I want to run for the presidency of the United States because I really have a vision and really want what's best for the country. Because people can say what they want about JFK, but they don't know the stories about he would lie in bed at night during the Cuban Missile Crisis and cry himself to sleep because he didn't want all of these people to die under his watch. And that's proven in the actions he's taken. Do we honestly believe that Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton is doing that they really care for our families or care for us or this country? and I just don't think so.
No. Well said, my friend. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about here tonight, Jake?
No, I think that just about wraps it up. I mean, I do want to just stress one more time, I'm not, a gargoyle. I'm not some depressing fatalist. And I'm also not somebody that likes to strike at people and get at them. I just feel like some hard words need to be said, and I feel like hopefully we win the right people over, and I hope anybody listening to this understands that like you, Rob, this case is a part of my life like it is theirs, and I'm a human being and I make mistakes, but I really have the right motive in it, and I just hope we can pull away from this type of behavior and really get back to what the focus should be, and that's finding out what happened on November 22nd, 1963, and finding out how we can fix it moving forward.
Absolutely. Well said, my friend. And folks, even out there on places like Facebook, you get involved with some of these negative people on there. They make this great thing. It's called a block button. And I would encourage everyone out there to use it, not just sparingly, just use it. I mean, it cuts out a lot of nonsense out of your life, and it makes your experience online so much better. And in closing, like I said, you can get Jake's books, Before History Dies and The Riptide, Amazon.com. Is there anything else, websites I'm missing here, Jake?
You can get it on Goodreads. You can get it in paperback or Kindle. You can get it on BarnesandNobles.com or the Apple app on the internet. You can pretty much find it anywhere. In the worst case scenario, I'm easy to find on social media, so you can message my fan page, Jacob M. Carter, on Facebook, and I'll do anything I can to get somebody a copy.
Cool deal. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure having you on here and talking to you, and we'll have to get you back on soon, man.
Okay, thanks so much, Rob, and man, as always, if I can do anything for you, let me know.
No problem. Thank you, Jake, for coming on the show. You hang on the line for me. Everybody, for more, head over to tlgpodcast.com. That is the home of the show. And once again, thank you to everybody out there that continues to support the show and share the show. Special thanks to Steve this week for supporting the show. I really appreciate it. The people appreciate it. That's it for now, people. This son of a bitch is in the can, beamed up the satellite down directly to your ears, people. This is your boy. Peace.
Most formidable JFK team on the planet. So if anybody wants to know about JFK, we've only got one line because we've got mostly guests here. Dr. James Fetzer, the leading JFK at 9/11 researcher in the world, a ton of 9/11, and the number one JFK researcher in the world with new information is Larry Rivera. And we're about to blow a hole in the whole JFK tonight because we've just discovered something that no one knows about. So we're going to break it right here on your show. And on Dealey Plaza route. The former President Buchanan's father was 1 block away from Dealey Plaza when the president's brain was blown out.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, Larry, look, you are the number one JFK researcher in the world, and you've just blown the case wide open. So go ahead and tell us now. I'm going to let everyone know.
Well, at the Oz for Innocence campaign, the organization that I preside, we have been talking about this and researching this for a long time. I know we've been at this now for
I got you. All right, Don, you got something to tell us?
Yeah, it's great to be making my maiden voyage here in the Crescent City.